The streets of Kiro City bustled with activity as Lian hurried through the crowded bazaar. Though the peddler's cries and tempting array of wares usually brought a smile to his face, today he kept his gaze low and shoulders hunched, avoiding eye contact. The bag of stolen ration cards slapped against his thigh with each quickened step, a grim reminder of what he'd been driven to just to feed his ailing sister. Lian slipped down an alley, finally letting out the anxious breath he'd been holding. But before relief could fully set in, the ground trembled and an ear-splitting boom thundered overhead. Gripped by panic, he looked up to see a fleet of sleek fighters streaking through the sky. This was no drill. The day they'd dreaded for years had finally arrived. Their city was under siege. Smoke plumed in the distance and warning sirens wailed as Lian broke into a desperate run toward home. He had to get to Leda before their sector came under attack. Darting through backways to avoid the chaos erupting on the main streets, his lungs burned and legs ached by the time he turned onto his block. Just 3 houses down, he skidded to a stop with horror. Where their little apartment had been now lay a heap of rubble. The roof caved in and walls collapsed. "Leta!" he screamed hoarsely, staggering toward the ruins. He clawed at the debris, cutting his hands on jagged fragments of concrete and metal. She had to be here somewhere, buried but alive. She just had to be. He kept digging until his fingers bled, calling her name again and again, though only silence answered. Exhausted, Lian finally sank to his knees. The sirens still wailed, but the rumbles of explosions had faded, leaving an eerie quiet. When he raised his head, he noticed a small hand protruding from the rubble beside him. Leta's hand. He took it gently, weeping as he pressed his forehead to her delicate fingers. His sweet sister was gone, their home destroyed, and the war had only just begun. Lian knelt there for what felt like hours, holding Leta's lifeless hand, his body racked with grief. The acrid smell of smoke hung in the air as fires raged in the distance. His city was burning, the future going up in flames before his eyes. Finally, Lian stirred, wiping the tears from his dirt-smeared face. He had to keep moving or the invading forces would find him. Gently laying Leta's hand down, he whispered a broken farewell before staggering to his feet. He couldn't stay here. Lian retrieved the stolen ration cards that had fallen from his bag. At least he could still provide for Velia, Leta's twin who was frail like her. She was across town staying with a neighbor while Leta recovered at home. He hoped Velia had found shelter when the attacks came. Trudging through the ghostly, quiet streets, Lian felt utterly lost. His family, his home, the only life he'd ever known, all gone or irrevocably changed. The smoke hung heavy, blotting out the sun and casting an eerie orange hue across the bombed-out buildings. It was like wandering through a nightmare. After an arduous journey, Lian reached the house where Velia had been staying. It was still intact. He rushed to the door but froze with his fist raised to knock. If Velia had survived the initial blitz, would telling her about Leta and their demolished home be a mercy or condemn her to the same shock and grief threatening to swallow him whole? Sparing her that pain would mean living a lie. Lian grappled with an impossible choice. Honest anguish or false hope. His hand remained suspended in indecision as shouts echoed from nearby. The troops were closing in. Time had run out for them all.